7. Golden Age stars who aged terribly. Number 7 is unreal. The bright lights of Hollywood's golden age turned ordinary people into gods and goddesses, beautiful, immortal, untouchable. But time doesn't care about star power. In fact, sometimes fame speeds up the aging process in ways that shock even the most devoted fans. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 11 legendary stars, whose final years were almost unrecognizable from their glory days. Some aged decades in just a few years. Others made desperate attempts to hold on to youth that backfired terribly. And one, number 7, underwent a transformation so shocking and heartbreaking that witnesses couldn't believe their eyes. These weren't just normal aging processes. These were cautionary tales written across once perfect faces. You've seen their classic films. What happened? 8 failed marriages certainly didn't help. Each divorce drained him financially and emotionally. His gambling addiction left him bankrupt multiple times. But the real culprit was the unrelenting stress of trying to maintain stardom after his youthful appeal had faded. In one particularly heartbreaking television appearance in the 1970s, audiences gasped when Rooney walked on stage. The man who had once been America's teenager now looked like he could be his own grandfather. His skin hung loose, deeply creased with premature wrinkles. His once athletic frame had grown soft and rounded. The cruel irony. Mickey Rooney would live to the remarkable age of 93, but he spent over half his life looking far older than his actual years, from teenage heartthrob to grizzled grandpa in record time. Betty Hutton, the blonde bombshell who vanished. In the 1940s, Betty Hutton lit up the screen with an incandescent energy that few could match. Known as the blonde bombshell, her performances in classics like The Miracle of Morgan's Creek and Annie Get Your Gun showcased her unique blend of comedy, singing, and dancing. Her face radiated a wholesome all-American beauty. Those perfect features, that million-dollar smile, those expressive eyes that could convey joy one moment and heartbreak the next. But the same intensity that made Betty a star would eventually contribute to her downfall. Behind the scenes, she was battling severe depression and an addiction to prescription pills. The pressure to maintain her image and career pushed her to the breaking point. By the late 1950s, Betty's star had begun to fade, and so had her legendary looks. A series of personal and professional setbacks, failed marriages, career disappointments, financial problems, took a devastating toll on her appearance. But the most shocking transformation came in the 1970s after she had largely disappeared. Breakdowns had left visible marks on her once radiant face. A series of botched cosmetic procedures, desperate attempts to reclaim her youthful appearance, had actually accelerated her aging process. Her features, once so perfectly proportioned, now seemed distorted and unnatural. In one rare television interview from 1974, the camera caught Betty in harsh, unforgiving light. The contrast between this tired, strained-looking woman and the vibrant star of just 2 decades earlier was shocking. Her skin appeared paper-thin and tightly stretched. Her eyes, once so expressive, now seemed perpetually surprised, the unfortunate result of surgery that had gone too far. Most tragic of all was Betty's own awareness of her transformation. "I don't look in mirrors anymore," she confessed in one of her final interviews. "The person I see there isn't me. It's not the Betty people remember, and it's not the Betty I want to remember either." She didn't just age, she disappeared behind a mask. Sensitive down to my fingertips. In fact, these fingers made me the best safe cracker in Paris and a virtuoso among the pigpucks. Peter Lorre, the man who became his own shadow. Peter Lorre never fit the conventional Hollywood mold of good looks. With his round face, bulging eyes, and soft-spoken manner, he carved out a niche playing unsettling characters in films like M and Casablanca. But in his youth, there was still something compelling about his appearance and intensity, a presence that commanded attention despite his small stature. As the years passed, however, Lorre's distinctive features began to morph into something genuinely disturbing, a combination of chronic health problems, morphine addiction, which began after a serious back injury, and heavy drinking accelerated his aging process at an alarming rate. By the 1960s, Lorre had become a shadow of himself, quite literally. His once round face had collapsed inward, with sunken cheeks and dark hollows under his eyes that made him look skeletal. His naturally pale complexion had taken on a sickly, almost gray pallor, and those famous eyes, once merely unsettling, now seemed to bulge even more prominently from his thinning face, giving him the appearance of a man perpetually shocked or frightened. In his final film roles, makeup artists actually had to work to make him look healthier rather than more sinister. The transformation was so complete that when Vincent Price viewed Laurier's body at his funeral in 1964, he reportedly remarked, "He looked so much better dead than alive." It wasn't a cruel joke, but a sad observation on how much suffering had been etched into every line of Peter Lorre's face in his final years. Time didn't take him softly, it dragged him down. Gloria Grahame. Beauty destroyed by her own hand. Gloria Grahame possessed one of the most distinctive faces of the 1950s film noir. With her pouty lips and sultry gaze, she embodied the femme fatale in classics like The Big Heat and In a Lonely Place. Her unique beauty won her millions of fans and an Academy Award for The Bad and the Beautiful. But Grahame harbored an obsession that would ultimately destroy her looks. She was fixated on her upper lip, convinced it was too thin. This seemingly minor insecurity would lead to one of Hollywood's most tragic beauty disasters. Beginning in the mid-1950s, Grahame underwent a series of procedures to plump her upper lip, but she didn't stop at conventional methods. According to Hollywood legend, she began stuffing cotton or tissue under her upper lip to make it appear fuller. Eventually, she turned to surgical options, having fat from other parts of her body injected into her lip. The results were disastrous. By the 1960s, Gloria's once subtle pout had resulted in permanently altering the very feature that had made her famous. The surgery was supposed to help. It did the opposite. That's a mistake that will be correct. Orson Welles, the genius who expanded in all directions. In his youth, Orson Welles possessed a commanding presence. Tall, handsome, with piercing eyes and a resonant voice that could hold audiences spellbound. When he made Citizen Kane at the age of 25, he wasn't just a directorial genius. He was also a striking leading man with intense good looks and undeniable charisma. But as Welles aged, his appearance underwent one of Hollywood's most dramatic transformations. His weight gain became the stuff of legend. The trim, dashing figure who had terrified America with his War of the Worlds broadcast morphed into a man of truly Falstaffian proportions. By the 1970s, Welles had more than doubled his original weight. His once chiseled features disappeared into a face that seemed to be constantly expanding. His eyes, still penetrating, now peered out from puffy hooded lids. His jawline, once so defined, vanished entirely. Even his voice, though still magnificent, became more labored as his breathing grew heavier. Welles wasn't ignorant of this transformation. He often made self-deprecating jokes about his size, once quipping, "My doctor told me to stop having intimate dinners for 4, unless there are 3 other people." But behind the humor lay genuine health concerns and a profound impact on his career. The weight gain, combined with decades of cigar smoking, heavy drinking, and chronic health issues, aged Welles prematurely. In his 60s, he moved with the labored gait of a man decades older. His skin developed a pallid, unhealthy pallor, and he suffered from exhaustion after even minor exertion. As his appearance changed, Welles became increasingly creative about hiding it. He took to wearing large, flowing
Bette Davis. Those eyes watched everything fade. She had the most incredible eyes. That's what people always said about Bette Davis, and they weren't wrong. Throughout her prime, those famously intense eyes dominated her face, expressing emotions that ranged from smoldering passion to murderous rage. Combined with her distinctive voice and fearless acting choices, Davis created an unforgettable screen presence that earned her 2 Academy Awards and a place among Hollywood's greatest legends. But the years were especially cruel to Bette Davis, transforming her from a commanding presence to a frighteningly frail figure. The decline began with decades of chain smoking, up to 4 packs a day by some accounts. The habit etched deep lines around her mouth and eyes, giving her a permanently severe expression. Then came a series of strokes in the late 1970s and early 1980s. The first, in 1983, partially paralyzed one side of her face and slurred her once crisp diction. When Davis appeared on talk shows in her final years, audiences were often shocked by her appearance. Her once full face had become gaunt and skeletal, with skin that seemed paper-thin and stretched too tight across prominent facial bones. Her famous posture, always so straight and proud, had curved into a permanent stoop. Even her hands, once so expressive in gestures, had become gnarled and trembling. Most shocking of all was her substantial weight loss. In her final film, The Whales of August 1987 appeared almost spectral, a thin, frail shadow of her former self. Her costumes hung loosely on a frame that seemed barely substantial enough to support them. Director Lindsay Anderson recalled having to shoot numerous takes because Davis lacked the physical strength to perform even simple movements consistently. Yet through it all, those famous eyes remained unchanged, still piercing, still intelligent, still unmistakably Bette Davis. They became even more prominent in her thinning face, creating an eerie contrast, the vibrant, fierce gaze of a legend looking out from the weathered face of a woman who had fought too many battles. Her eyes stayed fierce, but everything else faded fast. Rita Hayworth, the unbelievable tragedy no one understood. In the 1940s, Rita Hayworth wasn't just famous, she was iconic. Her performance in Gilda created one of cinema's most memorable moments when she tossed back her glorious red hair and captivated audiences worldwide. During World War II, her pinup photo was pasted on more barracks, walls, and submarine torpedoes than any other star. Her beauty seemed almost otherworldly. Perfect features, flawless skin, and a smile that radiated both innocence and seduction simultaneously. But Rita Hayworth's final years would reveal a tragedy so profound that it changed how Hollywood and the public understand aging and illness. The first signs appeared in the 1960s when Hayworth was still in her 40s. Known for her lightning-quick ability to memorize dialogue and complex dance routines, she suddenly began struggling with her lines. Directors noticed she seemed confused on set, often requiring multiple takes for simple scenes. Many, including Rita herself, attributed these problems to alcohol as she had developed a drinking habit over the years, but alcohol wasn't tachinid, the real culprit. By the early 1970s, Hayworth's appearance had changed dramatically. The graceful dancer who once moved with liquid precision now shuffled with an uncertain gait. Her famous face, once so animated and expressive, had taken on a perpetually confused look, eyes vacant, mouth slightly slack. Her weight fluctuated dramatically, and in public appearances she seemed disoriented, sometimes not recognizing longtime friends and colleagues. The most heartbreaking moment came during a 1966 film shoot where Hayworth repeatedly forgot her lines and appeared lost on a set filled with people she'd known for years. Production was eventually abandoned. Crew members reported seeing the once greatest sex symbol in the world standing alone, disoriented in her dressing room, unable to recognize her own reflection in the mirror. What the public didn't know, what even Rita herself didn't understand, was that she was suffering from Alzheimer's disease. Decades before it became a widely recognized condition, the diagnosis wouldn't come until 1980, making Hayworth one of the first public figures to put a face to this devastating illness. In her final public appearances, fans were shocked by what they saw. The legendary beauty was now bloated and disheveled, with haunted eyes that seemed to be constantly searching for something just out of reach. Her once perfect features were frozen in a mask-like expression. The famous Hayworth hair, those glorious red locks that had helped make her a star, hung limp and often unwashed as she could no longer manage her own basic care. The contrast between the vibrant star of CoverGirl and this confused, vulnerable woman was so extreme that many fans thought the photos must be fake or greatly exaggerated, but they weren't. This was the cruel reality of an illness that was stealing Rita's mind while leaving her body intact. By the time of her death in 1987 or ours, Rita Hayworth had spent nearly 2 decades in a slow decline, unaware of her own legendary status, unable to recognize her family, and completely disconnected from the woman she had once been. The downfall was so shocking, people thought it was a hoax, but it was very real and heartbreaking. Montgomery Clift, beauty shattered and reassembled. When Montgomery Clift arrived in Hollywood, his looks were so perfect they seemed almost unreal. With chiseled features, soulful eyes, and a sensitive demeanor, he represented a new kind of male beauty. Less rugged than the stars who came before him, more vulnerable and complex. Alongside Marlon Brando and James Dean, he helped redefine masculinity on screen, bringing emotional depth and psychological complexity to his roles. Then came the night that split his life and his face in two. On May 12, 1956, after leaving a dinner party at Elizabeth Taylor's home, Clift's car slammed into a telephone pole. The accident shattered his face, breaking his nose and jaw, fracturing his sinus, and leaving him with partial paralysis on the left side of his face. He needed extensive reconstructive surgery, and while doctors did their best, the Montgomery Clift who emerged was visibly different from the one audiences had fallen in love with. The right side of his face remained largely as it had been, handsome, expressive, perfect. But the left side became partially frozen with a slightly sunken appearance. His mouth sometimes drooped on one side. The symmetry that had made him so striking was gone forever, but the physical changes were only the beginning.